Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's transformative impact on the front players. Is this a fairly obvious thing that we should just have expected, that we should have anticipated that a few minor tweaks would suddenly release the hounds that were ready to come from Manchester United players?
I think if we extract stuff from what we've all been talking about over the length of our professional friendship, professional careers, then something that Pat was giving you, I think, a microscopic understanding of confidence. Okay, he tweaked it in that he was talking about specific body shapes, the way in which Lukaku has gone from looking a little bit down in the dumps and clumsy, despite being one of the players who was wholly committed to Mourinho. And I think the broad brush approach, if you say should we have expected it, is that he mirrors, although the effect on each of them is maybe has a different cause, he mirrors what's happening right across that squad, which I think was not only blindingly obvious, but I know we've talked about, and I certainly have written about and said to you guys, that Mourinho was a drain on energy, that Mourinho was no longer applying as much attention to individual coaching, a flaw that he picked up in his second spell at Chelsea, if you ask anybody who witnessed particularly the sacking season in his second spell at Chelsea. Back turned to training, portfolio of information not as detailed as he once became famous for, and not only did his relationship with individual players at Manchester United break down, when I use that phrase that he was a drain on their energy, he was also a drain on their confidence. When you get, I take your underlying point that neither you nor Pat were calling Solskjaer a genius. He was applying his expertise, having been a very, very good striker. He was picking up on something that I think was pretty easy meat in saying to Lukaku and to Rashford and to Lingard and to Pogba and to Matic, here are the things that I know you do well. Here's how I want you to do them, fitting into a greater team pattern. And when you get better training sessions, when you get better enjoyment and above all, better confidence, then maybe your phrase about should we have expected it comes true. And I think the answer then is yes.
This leads us nicely to Jose Mourinho, who is being linked with an immediate return to Real Madrid because of the situation that Real Madrid find themselves in. We talked about this, I don't know, a couple of months ago. Almost was reminding us a little bit earlier on in the show. Is it that realistic that it could happen so quickly?
Realistic. Look, it's feasible. Would Florentino Perez, if things continue along the lines of the Eibar defeat away 3-0 for Santi Solari, if things were to continue along the lines of the way in which Real Madrid chucked away a viable win at Villarreal, 2-1 up, sat back, not only then lost the lead, but looked as if they might lose the game. Solari then defended his tactics, saying, well, draws are important. The media jumped all over him. His team went out and played ridiculously poorly against Real Sociedad. Solari made mistakes in who he picked, and therefore, if that were to repeat once or twice more, is Florentino Perez capable of sacking his interim coach? Yes, that's a fact. Should he do that? No, I don't think so. And when you ask for an actuarial assessment about realistic chance, Gerard, you have to bring in the Mourinho factor. Mourinho is one thing he hasn't lost is that he's savvy, he's scheming. I think I've said to you again in recent months ago, my belief that Mourinho had it as part of his grand plan that he could take over at Real Madrid from the summer. He saw that Real Madrid were ailing. The instant Zidane went away, he was knee-deep in Manchester United and expected to stay. He's twice turned down Florentino Perez since being sacked, the first time from Real Madrid. Florentino Perez's belief that Mourinho can set the club straight and can go on an aggressive attacking front foot against Football Club Barcelona is undiminished. That's a fact. Mourinho taking the job in mid-season with the nick that this squad is in, I think that's where your percentage chance diminishes. I think that when he's offered the job, he will say that I will take it in summer only. And at that point, he's putting himself up against candidates, because I think there are candidates. I'm not certain that Allegri will stay at Juventus at the end of the season. Joachim Low has said that he's ready for club football. Joachim Low has been an attractive proposition to Florentino Perez in the past. Pochettino is somebody that there is now a queue for, and I saw in recent hints that while he's saying he wants to stay forever and a day at Spurs, he's also saying quite difficult to win trophies without spending a bit more money. So he's at least a subject for discussion, although it'll be difficult to get clear. Mourinho taking over mid-season with the nick that this squad is in, I would be surprised.
It would be very interesting, though, even if it isn't now, but even at the end of the season, if Jose Mourinho does take over, and you would suspect that Perez would give him the backing, he would allow Jose Mourinho to do the things in the transfer window that Ed Woodward did not allow him to do at Manchester United. And it would be very intriguing to see then how the game management and the attitude of Jose Mourinho would then change. You talk about being aggressive and going on the front foot a little bit more. Could it prove that Jose Mourinho's tenure at Manchester United, particularly for the duration of this season, was just one big sulk because he didn't get what he wanted from the board?
Wow. If you want my honest opinion, having watched him, having spoken to people who've worked for him at, each of his last 4 clubs, my opinion is no. I think that he has lost something material. I think that he is the equivalent of Lukaku, but in managerial terms. I think that Jose Mourinho needs a professor. Somebody who is beyond the influence Jorge Mendes has on him in terms of, here's your next financial move, here's the way that you can play this politically. I think Jose Mourinho's coaching manual, people use the phrase out of date, that everybody else has moved on and he hasn't. I think that's a really poor way of describing what's gone on. I think he's lost his way individually. I think that his coaching ideas are probably as relevant and potentially, when well applied with a squad fully behind him, I think he's potentially as damaging to other clubs and other teams as he once was. It's him who's changed. It's him who's lost his way. And the one long sulk idea, I think, is a good micro assessment of what's happened over the last few months. But in my opinion, the traces of what we saw at Manchester United were fully available in his last year at Real Madrid, were fully available for parts of his tenure at Chelsea. And therefore, I think that there's more wrong on than his petulance that he wasn't allowed to get the specific players that he asked for. Because I think it's legitimate, although Ed Woodward is no technical director, is no director of football, and needs to be moved aside. I think we can say that he did back him financially. It was a fallout over specifics that caused the rift. I think it's Mourinho who has the individual problem, and it's Mourinho who needs to change, not just his club situation or his relationship with a director of football.
Real Madrid are up against Ajax in the round of 16 in the Champions League. This is still a competition that this team and this collection of players could win. We've seen them have bad seasons and win Champions Leagues in the past. Would that be the potential thing that might be able to tempt Mourinho to stand at the end of the season alone on the pitch, holding the trophy, going, yeah, I did this?
It's a really good question. It's a fair point. First of all, I back your assessment that were it to be the case that they could drop Marcelo, play Reguilon, get Nacho fully fit, so that it wasn't Varane and Ramos every single game, get Marcos Llorente anchoring the midfield, possibly once Casemiro is match fit, playing the two of them together. If Vinicius has got a little spark of life in him that he showed the other day in defeat at home to La Real, then your argument is sound. And yeah, there's a pattern whereby it doesn't need Real Madrid to be fully firing domestically in order to win the Champions League. And yeah, I take your point that if he did a SWOT analysis on Real Madrid and felt that Pintus, the fitness coach, was bringing this squad to the boil, there were some signs of that before Christmas. They won pretty handsomely in the World Club Championship, albeit against opposition that would have been bottom of the table, bottom third of the table in La Liga. I think that you've made an argument there. Yes, it is a sprint now to the Champions League. Ajax, although they are playing much better football, are a much more mature side. And although Wesley Sneijder, ex-Ajax, ex-Real Madrid, did a very big piece here over the holiday season saying if Real Madrid think they're going to pick Ajax off the way that Manchester United did in the Europa League, then they've misjudged them. This is a changed side. And I think that's a decent argument. And the sides that, for example, when you watch the way in which Levante and Eibar beat Real Madrid, to say that Ajax knocking them out of the Champions League is impossible would be utterly foolhardy. But yeah, I see your low-hanging fruit argument. I see how that could attract Jose Mourinho. I take that point. One
last thing we did want to talk to you about this week, Graham, was the legacy of Cesc Fàbregas. Obviously, an emotional goodbye from him in the last game that he'll play, probably in English football. And I know, obviously, that time that he had at Barcelona has come to be considered something of a failure around the rest of the world, given how amazing. There was a short period there where it looked like he was going to reach the full flower of his potential. And yet at the same time, this is a guy who's won 2 European championships, a World Cup, 2 league titles with Chelsea, a bunch of FA Cups, was club captain at Arsenal at 18. Like, it's been an amazing career.
Yeah, I think as well a remarkable footballer. I think there were spells when Cesc Fàbregas played a brand of football which was iconic in the way that Europe began to reevaluate the use of the ball, positional football, short passing in triangles in order to drag opponents about, and he'll stay iconic for that. I think that one of the things that he had as well was a toughness. He's a real tough guy, tough on the pitch, tough off the pitch, and therefore he was able to handle the transition to Premier League football, which at that stage not every Spaniard was finding himself capable of doing. Where I think it might, if you're asking if it's fair that some of his legacy is a little bit tarnished, like Sergio Busquets, he needed more speed athletically. If he had been blessed with a little bit more athletic speed, then his durability to impose the things that he does really well would have lasted longer at a higher level, in my opinion. I also remember his character. I'm not sure if you listed that in his Garlands, but I spoke to him and I spoke to Vicente Del Bosque a lot during the 2010 World Cup when Cesc was dropped and out. And he is a sulky guy. That's another thing that those who've worked around, you get either all sunshine or it's dark clouds and, a grim face from Cesc Fàbregas around the training ground. And he was like that. Vicente Del Bosque said to me in an interview, in a chat in a corridor in one of the stadiums in the World Cup, Cesc is pissed off with me, and he's quite right to be too, because at his club he'd be an automatic choice. My next interview with Cesc, I said to him, how do you cope with this? I'll be ready. My job is to be ready. I'll be ready. Brought off the bench in the World Cup final. He is ready. He nicks onto the loose ball as I think Van der Vaart falls over in the penalty area, slots it to Iniesta, goal. I think that's a really decent, iconic moment in anybody's career, no?
Yeah, we were talking about tiers of midfielders in Premier League history, and obviously short Premier League. So there's Keane, there's Vieira, there's Scholes, then there's a secondary tier which has Lampard and Gerrard, and then just below that there's Cesc. Is that right?
Yeah, for a barroom discussion, for off-the-ball discussion, yeah. I don't know if Steven Gerrard and Lampard are saying, I wish I was on that next tier, when they look at their bank balances, when they look at the way the club fans feel about, when they look at their medals. I'd also like to throw in there Manu Petit, who, for my money, for maybe a shorter time than you're talking about, was utterly extraordinary. There will be others. Does Cesc's impact on the game match those that you've listed? No, it probably doesn't. And I would also say that part of that comes down to his ability to be fleet of foot and move away from tackles rather than pass away from tackles. It's a small component. It has afflicted Sergio Busquets, and the brain and the foot and the sort of geometric, the vision about angles, all those things were there. But other players that you've mentioned had different things, I do agree. But he's one of the most British of the Spaniards, says Fàbregas, in my opinion.
One last point about that. Am I right in saying he was the first proper false nine in the Guardiola era? Because there was a season where before Christmas he had banged in 10, 12, 14 goals and then didn't score for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I mean, the way in which Guardiola stole the concept of a false nine, which obviously has roots in Hungarian football, and effectively Guardiola played with one, with Michael Laudrup, who is not a centre-forward, played as a false nine in that dream team on occasions when Romario didn't start or whatever, or Salinas. But Messi was the first reinvention of that concept for Pep Guardiola, at least in the 6-2, called him 2-3 nights before the 6-2 win away at the Bernabeu in his first season. But Fàbregas, yes, played that. When Fàbregas moved to the midfield at Football Club Barcelona, what happened was he was bombarded with the type of information, Open University PhD thesis stuff that Pep Guardiola felt, because Cesc could apply them on the pitch, that he would understand instantly. But because Fàbregas had spent so long in English football with utterly different requirements placed on him, he actually admitted that he was confused, and that to compute all the information about position, about when to pass, about how many passes Guardiola wanted, how to drag opponents about. Cesc took a long time to compute that, looked a little bit lost on the pitch, and then came out and said, I'm struggling to compute all of this. At which point, yes, he did get used in that role, and that helped the Spain national team endlessly, because at the end of Pep's final season in 2012, Del Bosque used Fàbregas as a false nine in the European Championships. Not every time against Ireland, of course. I bet you wish that he had, because Fernando Torres started and did quite well in Dansk, sorry about the mention. And Fàbregas, therefore, that his club form and what he was asked to do by Guardiola was a direct spur to Spain winning 2012.
Graham, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million.
Lads.
It's Graham Hunter giving us some thoughts on Cesc.
The thing is, Cesc Fàbregas is not retired from football.
Well, he has gone to Monaco, you know.
Who knows? Monaco
It's
could...
the new Major League Soccer.